think it was Peter's personal goal or agenda that I become the first woman president of NH&RA, and he succeeded. It's my pleasure to be here today to introduce this year's Vision Awardees in the private sector. Jim Keefe and Patrick Lee, the principals of Trinity Financial, no strangers to the people in this room. In 1987, Jim and Pat, coming from the private and the public sectors respectively, united their talents and experience to form Trinity Financial. For 25 years, they've been a prominent voice in the Boston real estate community. As Peter said, this organization is comprised of the leaders in the real estate community in Boston and certainly in the affordable housing community. In 2006, they created the Trinity Financial Charitable Fund to provide financial support for low and moderate income communities, for education, community development, and safety programs. They weren't just about housing. I first met Jim and Pat in 1988 while I was at Boston Capital, working with Jack Manning and Herb Collins, whom I'm sure most of you in this room know, providing equity for what was then the fledgling Section 42 tax credit program. As many of you in this room, whose hair is more the color of mine, will remember, that was not an easy task in the aftermath of the 1986 Tax Act, and with it the demise of the tax-sheltered investment vehicle that many of us had used to provide equity financing for the development of affordable housing. That was the subsidy for affordable housing for decades, until the 1986 Tax Act gave us the tax credit program. So Jack comes to me, I've been with Boston Capital for quite a while by then, and says, we have a deal that we really have to do. It's a deal that this program is all about. Jack and Herb, for many of you know, were very instrumental with other leaders in this industry in developing the tax credit program with Congress. This is what this program is about, and we have to do this deal. But I have to admit, Jack was a little concerned the marketing department might not actually embrace this concept, however. The concept was a little out there in 1988. It was a 15-unit, what a little tiny deal. It was a 15-unit, single-room occupancy dwelling in Boston's South End, intended for occupancy by formerly homeless, recovering drug and alcohol abusers. And while it might have been in the South End, happened to be next door to a bar. Marketing used to say, I did a lot of marketing with the marketing department, marketing used to say location was everything. They really never mentioned the location of this property in their marketing materials, not that much anyway. Jim and Pat were at that time the development manager for the owner. The owner, a visionary in their own right, was the Pine Street Inn and its affiliate, the Paul Sullivan Housing Trust. So I remember my first meeting with Jim and Pat, who were laughing at me in the back of the room, telling them their deal didn't work. Not only did the marketing department not really care for it, wasn't really a lot of equity, but that was a relative term back in 1988 when we were trying to raise equity. It didn't project any net cash flow. The ratio of expenses to income was totally upside down. So in fact, it had what we call the declining debt service coverage ratio, not exactly a good precept in real estate development. So their response, like the response of all developers, even today, was these are very conservative projections. Property is going to work. Property is going to work much better than this. Well, we collectively at Boston Capital and our investors embraced the projections. We worked the marketing folks real hard. We all came around to seeing what Pine Street and Jim and Pat already knew. This was what the program was all about. I must admit, Jim and Pat were right. Yes, here publicly I'm announcing that. Jim and Pat were right. The property worked. It has been a winner since it was completed in 1988. I can't believe that it was that long ago and that I was doing it that long ago. 4 more properties followed with Pine Street, 5 YMCAs around the state, all providing not just affordable housing, but supportive services for those most in need. Then for something they could really sink their teeth into in 1988, they became owner-developers. They took on one of the first Hope 6 redevelopments in the country, Orchard Gardens, followed by 5 more, and I think a 6th about to begin construction if it hasn't already in Taunton. I had the pleasure of working with Jim and Pat on their Orchard Park transaction as well. It was interesting to be on the cutting edge of using the low-income housing tax credit with Hope 6 and all the other sources of financing that were available at that time to make deals work. Since its beginning in 1987, Trinity has participated as owner or developer or development manager in more than 60 properties, containing more than 7,000 housing units and more than 500,000 square feet of commercial space. They have gone from development manager with the Pine Street Inn to developing their own affordable housing developments, but developing neighborhoods, putting a shopping center where one is needed in a neighborhood that didn't have one. You can't have decent housing for folks, and they can't have any place to shop without having to have a car or to get on the subway. So they have branched out far beyond just providing affordable housing, but providing, and more than supportive services, providing the services and the resources that residents need to live where they want to live near their jobs. Their experience and portfolio include the development of properties using, again, the federal housing tax credit. They have used the state housing tax credit, historic credits, every form of federal, state, and city financing programs that are available to squeeze every last dime of available sources into their properties. HUD grants, the home program, you name it, they've done it, they've mastered it. They excel at turning complex ideas into tangible assets. Before I introduce Jim and Pat, they've asked me to acknowledge some of the tremendous people who have contributed to Trinity's success, many of whom have been with them from the beginning of their vision. Among them, Kathy Bachman. I don't know if Kathy's in the room. I don't see Kathy. John Mackey, who I know is here because I saw him earlier. Hi, John. And Jim Malia. He's not in the room. Jim and Pat are somewhat reluctant honorees. They do what they do because they believe in what they do. Please join me in welcoming Jim and Pat.